As part of its mission and strategy, Eastern Bank has been supporting community organizations with a focus on social justice. One example of the effort is the bank's Social Justice Award for this year. We'd like to welcome the recipient, the founder of the Boston Basics, Ron Ferguson, along with the Eastern Bank Charitable Foundation's president and CEO, Nancy Huntington Stager. Thank you both for being with us. Yeah. I want to start with Nancy because a lot of businesses, they do philanthropic things, but I guess with the Eastern Bank here, this is also about investment in the community, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're a community bank at the beginning and the end. And as a community bank, we're very much tied to the success of the communities where we live and work. And so we feel strongly that philanthropy, advocacy, and volunteerism are additional ways that we can help grow our communities. And in 1999, for example, our board decided to give 10% of our net income to charity every year, which we've done since then. And so the foundation has grown now to almost $125 million in assets. And that allows us an opportunity to invest in our communities through a number of small grants, as well as going deeper and stronger with larger grants in aspects that are really important to our communities. For example, what we're doing now in early childhood development.
Ron Ferguson, you've been working for many years at Harvard on closing the racial gap in achievement, and the basics, Boston Basics, this is an outgrowth of that. So how does that take things to a new level?
It addresses a period in life that people are not paying much attention to or haven't been until recently. Most of across the country, when people talk about preschool, they're basically talking about ages 3 to 5. But there's a period in early childhood that's labeled developmental plasticity, where the brain is in a state of developmental plasticity. It's forming and kids are learning like sponges. If you look at the cross-section of brain tissue, a 2-year-old's brain density looks more like an adult than like a 1-year-old. The brain is 80% of its adult size by the time kids are 3 and 90% of its adult size by the time kids are 5. And so I was shocked 10 years ago when I looked at some nationally representative data and noticed that socioeconomic and racial cognitive skill gaps are very apparent by the age of 2. And it turns out we know a lot about what we can do about that. Those differences are traceable to differences in early childhood lived experiences. And so the idea is that we need to harvest that opportunity for early brain development that helps make learning easier through kids' whole lives, that can totally be a game changer for schools. You have so many more children showing up ready for school. It reduces teacher turnover. It makes all kinds of differences. And so we decided to really mobilize a campaign that could go to scale. And we think of it as a campaign and a movement. The campaign is kind of the systematic part. The movement is kind of the viral part, right? So the idea is to try to achieve what we call socio-ecological saturation. People live in social ecologies. We want it to be almost impossible that a parent in a participating community doesn't know about the basics. And not only that they know about the basics, but they also receive social support from several directions for using it. So their pediatrician is talking to them about it, their librarian is talking, grandma knows about it, the minister talked about it at church. And so over a period of time, we think we can have entire cohorts of children show up for school more well prepared and then prosper and thrive through life.
Nancy, there are numerous organizations concerned with social justice and closing gaps in Boston. What's so special about this program?
Well, I think I had that same revelation you had, Ron, just about 10 years later when I saw this. And, a lot of money. Boston's one of the most philanthropic cities in the country. And when you peel that back a little bit, you see that most of that charity, most of the philanthropy goes to arts and cultural organizations, hospitals, and universities, which are all great. And but when you peel it all back, only about 1.1% of all that philanthropy goes to addressing the wealth gap. And we've studied it so many times, and there are a lot of highly credible studies out there that shows that economic class and race are in effect determinants of a child's success. And it shouldn't be that way. And it doesn't need to be that way. And so when we became introduced with the basics, which is such an accessible thing. I mean, it is literally simple things that every parent can do once they know about it. And it's just about getting this, as Ron just said, into the hands of every family, of every caregiver, of every pediatrician or others that are involved in the strength and health and development of a child. And when they hear this and they can use it, then they are going to be able to help that child to have the best possible start in life.
Maybe we'll just tell them what the it is.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
what the basic principles are. Right.
Yeah, because I know on one level this is about the village advancing a child, but what is it exactly that the parents do?
Okay, we put together a national advisory committee that helped us to distill the science down to 5 propositions, 5 principles. The first is maximize love, manage stress. When infants are stressed, they don't develop executive function skills to the same degree. Executive function skills are self-control skills, the ability to resist temptation, to make a plan and follow through on it, to shift attention from one thing to another. Okay, we talk about kids showing up fidgety in kindergarten, they can't sit still. Well, those executive function skills they need. And being free from, at least not being under intense stress, helps with that. So we want the parent to manage their stress, we want them to shield the baby from stress. That's the first thing. The second basic principle is talk, sing, and point. Babies can hear at least 3 months before they're born. So they come out of the womb already having started to encode language. There are studies showing that babies cry in the rhythm of their mother's native language, for example. And so we want people to talk real talk instead of baby talk. They may use that high sing-songy voice that we call parentese, but still real words, so you build on the baby's beginning comprehension. Pointing helps babies to associate words with objects, so it accelerates language acquisition, to point and to talk real talk. So that's the second basic. The third principle is count, group, and compare. So working on those parts of the brain that deal with numeracy and quantitative things, calling kids' attention to differences in magnitudes, high, far, big, small, high, low, and playing grouping games with toddlers. It's an intellectual breakthrough for a toddler to realize that a number corresponds to a group. 5 is not just what you say after 4. 5 is 5 of something. And playing grouping games with between 4 and 10 objects helps kids to reach that realization more quickly. The fourth principle is explore through movement and play. We want parents to understand that playtime is discovery time. That if they tune into what their kids are paying attention to, they can amplify, they can let the kid know they're a learning partner, they can let the child know that their curiosity is welcomed. And then the fifth of the basics is read and discuss stories. We all know we should read, but we don't think about the fact that we should discuss. And so it's that back and forth exchange that really adds a lot of value to the exchange. There's actually a recent study, collaboration between MIT and Harvard researchers, that showed that the number of back and forth exchanges that are picked up in a listening device that the child wears, where you hear the adult voice and the child voice within 5 seconds of one another, the more often that happens in a household, the brighter the child's brain lights up on an MRI scan when they're being read to. There's a region of the brain that deals with these kinds of skills.
You're describing things that go on in the family almost all the time, but parents might think of them as a chore, they might not think they're important. The way you talk about them, they sound like they're really valuable, and maybe people don't realize that.
That's really the
fun.
point. Yeah, that's really the point. Each of the things you've just described are easily done, and sometimes parents do them and sometimes they don't, but they don't understand the importance of doing them and how it fits and connects with being a really good parent and with being able to help your child to develop to the best of their ability. Once you know that, the chance of asking or the chance of following these principles is increased, and that's what helps the child's brain develop. That's what helps that child to be kindergarten ready. And we know the studies that show that if a child enters kindergarten ready, they're 82% more likely to be proficient in 3rd grade. And if they enter kindergarten not proficient and ready to be in kindergarten, they're only 45% chance of being proficient in third grade. That's a huge difference. And that's a time frame where it becomes very expensive for school districts, for parents, for companies to have to remediate that. So if we can change that focus or just enhance the focus.
And it's the intentionality. We use the word intentionality.
Yeah.
I mean, I raised 3 boys. I kind of did these things. But if I had known these things when I was parenting, I would have done it much more on purpose, right? We read, I think until our kids were in 5th grade, we had bedtime reading every day. But I could probably count on one hand the number of times we had a discussion about it, right? And so a lot of time, middle-class parents in particular come, oh yeah, I did that stuff with my kids. I'm gonna say, no, you didn't. You know, you kind of did some of it. But I could walk through each one of them and talk about things I didn't do that I would have done if I'd known.
Well, that's it. You know, when I first heard about the basics, you know, hearing, you know, did you stop in the middle of the story and say, what comes next? That never occurred to me, you know, and I was a very devoted, dedicated, am still a parent. It never occurred to me. But had I known the importance of it, I would have done it. And I believe that's true for all parents. It doesn't matter. If you want to be as successful a parent as you can be and allow your child to develop, to have the best start they can have, these are really simple things that you can do, but you have to know them and you have to know why they're important.
And I think there are a few big mistakes people make that we need to even work more on targeting. One is people are denying affection to infants for fear of spoiling them. And they're denying affection to toddler boys for fear of undermining their masculinity, right? And we need a whole messaging campaign to deal with those 2 things.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there is more that people can learn. Ron, you've got a website where people can check that out?
BostonBasics.org.
And Nancy, of course, from Eastern Bank, you've got something as well too, right?
Yes, easternbank.com, and we're delighted to support what you're doing with the basics. And as an employer, we encourage all employers to jump on the bandwagon and help the basics to really get this out in every aspect.
And we're eternally grateful to Eastern Bank for the support.
Okay, thank you both very much, Ron Ferguson and Nancy Huntington Stager.